Hi, this is a podcast dedicated to role models on your doorstep here at the University of Leeds. This is a project funded by Research England through the Enhancing Research Culture stream. We wanted to create a platform to share relatable and inspirational stories from colleagues from a range of cultural backgrounds, sexual orientations, roles, and career stages. I'm Marjorie Boissinot, Research Culture Development Advisor in Organizational Development and Professional Learning, or ODPL for short. Today, I'll be talking to Dr. Taryn Bell, Researcher Development Advisor focused on career development, who is also based in ODPL. Taryn will be talking to me about her career journey, her experience as a PGR during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how she has navigated her career path so far. Hello, Taryn. Thank you for joining me today.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'm looking forward to this. I was wondering if I could start by asking you to tell us about your role here at Leeds.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a researcher development advisor and I focus on career development. And essentially, what this means is that I support researchers at the University of Leeds with their career development. So, this means it really differs day to day. Sometimes I'm developing resources, sometimes I'm planning and delivering workshops, sometimes I'm working with schools or faculties or individual researchers to support career development. And my favorite part of the job really is running some of our long-term group programs like Fellowship Accelerator, which is for our postdoctoral researchers who want to apply for a research fellowship, and things like Career Architect as well. So it's a really varied role, but what brings it all together is it's all about supporting the researcher community and making sure that they can achieve what they want to achieve their full potential.
That's fantastic. Thank you for explaining your role. And it looks like it's very diverse. And you've anticipated my next question, which was asking you about your favorite part of your role and being at the University of Leeds. So thank you for that. Well, that leads me fantastically to my next question anyway, because I mean, I'm privileged. I work with you, so I've heard a bit more about your journey so far. But could you tell for our audience, tell us a bit more about your life journey before getting your job at Leeds and how this has led you to work here with us today?
Yeah, it's been a long and kind of winding road, I guess. So I originally really wanted to be an academic. So ever since I did my undergraduate degree, which was in archaeology, I was really interested in becoming an academic. I just loved archaeology. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been interested in the past. Ever since my mum is a big fan of history. She used to take me to museums, and she gave me a little kind of encyclopedia of history, and I used to absolutely love it. So I really loved research. So I did my undergrads, and then my master's and my PhD, but with time in the middle to work, because obviously as something we struggle with a lot in the UK is funding to do these things. So there were gaps where I worked in a school, I worked for a company that helped people in financial hardship in between my degrees. I did my master's, absolutely loved it, was 100% sure I wanted to be an academic. Then went back out into work while I applied for PhD funding, went back to my PhD, and probably about 18 months into my PhD, I realized I did not want to be an academic, that it really wasn't the career for me. I absolutely loved my research, but I really loved all the parts of my PhD that involved teaching or mentoring or supporting students. And I realized I loved that stuff more than I did the actual research. I spent a lot of time doing public outreach, teaching, supporting students, and I realized that that was what really drove me. And honestly, that led to a little bit of a crisis, sort of a personal crisis, not to put it too dramatically, but a little bit of a crisis partway through my PhD where I thought I have no idea what I want to do. And I had a chat with a friend who was starting up a business as a life coach, and I basically said, I don't know what I want to do. So we talked a lot about what I'd done, and what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy, and we kind of centered around this idea that I needed to go into a job that was supporting others in their learning or in their development. So right at the end of my PhD, funnily enough, that same friend sent me a job advertisement at the University of York to be a fellowship coordinator. So, supporting researchers who were applying for fellowships, supporting our community of fellows at the university, looking after them, supporting their career development. And I absolutely loved it. And then about a year and a half into that role, I came over to the University of Leeds to take on a role as a research and development advisor, which I just absolutely love. I really genuinely love my job. There's just so much variety day to day. And Leeds as a university has a really friendly and welcoming vibe. So I feel like I've settled in really quickly. And when I put it like that, my kind of life journey or my career journey feels it all made sense, but at the time it felt really chaotic and I often didn't feel like I knew where I was going. It wasn't like I had a really set out plan, and I just feel incredibly lucky that I've ended up where I am now.
Thank you. This is so interesting to hear because a lot of us with backgrounds in research, and I hear that from a lot of postdocs I used to support, when you find out the academic career is no longer what you thought was for you, that crisis moment comes, that
Oh yeah.
acknowledging what do I do now? What other skills do I have? What do I like doing? And then it comes from other aspects of things you did, like the teaching or other works
Hmm.
but bringing it together can be really, really hard. And having
Yeah.
external supports like your friend, in this case, who started this business, like those life defining moments. And in what you explain is like, yeah, you don't have it all together, although it appears to have developed
Hmm.
fantastically now. What do you say have been your greatest challenges and barriers in life, and how did you manage to overcome those difficult moments?
Yeah, I mean, I want to start by saying I really consider myself incredibly lucky to be where I am. And I think I've also had a lot of support and I'm very privileged in many ways. I was a first generation student. My mum didn't even finish school. And I think for some of my family, there was always this idea of why on earth would you want to go and study more? What's that all about? But I was really privileged in that they've always been incredibly supportive and incredibly lovely. I think the funny thing is when I thought about this question at first, it made me laugh because I thought if I asked my family and friends this, I know exactly what they'd say my biggest barrier is. And my biggest barrier is myself because I have absolutely zero self belief, terrible imposter syndrome, and I just never feel good enough. And honestly, academia for me made me feel way more like an imposter. I never felt like I was good enough. Um, Luckily, though, actually, ever since I've entered the role I'm in now, those feelings haven't been nearly as bad because I feel like I've entered an environment where I belong, where I fit in, where I feel like I'm a member of the team. I really enjoy what I'm doing and I love the people I work with, which makes it a bit better. But yeah, my dad always laughs at me and says that I'm my own worst enemy. So sometimes I think that I'm probably the barrier getting in the way, actually, because I do sometimes think if we're really blunt and really honest about it, academia is a really tough environment, and it took me years to get my PhD because I had to keep taking breaks in between my degrees to save up money to afford to study. Um, and I think that can knock you back quite a bit as well because academia can sometimes make you feel a little bit like doesn't really want you, or you have to try really hard just to get your foot in the door. And so when I did my PhD, I always really struggled with that sense of, is this really what I'm meant to do? Do I fit in here? Do I believe in myself?
Thank you for your honesty in your answer to that question. It is so true that a lot of people in academia do struggle with that imposter syndrome, that it is a very challenging environment, and that a lot of the time the barrier is our own mindset
Mm.
and how we approach things. And I think it's wonderful how you reflected on how others would answer that question if you for you. That's a very innovative approach. It's like, what would you say? That- That's really, really good. What amazes me is like in your research, you started in obviously a very specific field,
Hmm.
and now you've moved to support first fellowship applicants and their careers development in Leeds across a much wider range of research topics and disciplines across all faculties than the one you originally trained in and developed in the earlier stages of the academic career doing your PhD. So could you tell me a bit more about how you've adapted to support a much more diverse range of disciplines coming from archaeology and psychology?
Yeah,
How did you
absolutely.
adapt?
So it's really interesting because one of the things I remember someone saying to me when I knew I was going to move out of academia, I remember someone saying to me, just beware, it's completely normal to have a bit of a kind of identity crisis once you leave academia. And weirdly, I didn't experience it after I left. I think I experienced it when I was in it because I realized there was a disconnect between what I was doing and what I wanted to do. So, in many ways, I never had that identity crisis afterwards because I'd already been through it. I think I think that was a big thing for me. I'd already come to terms with that. I wanted to come to the terms with the fact that I wanted to do something different. Um, and I really like, people often say to me, it's really funny you didn't want to be an academic, but you want to support other people to become academics. And my answer is always, well, I don't want to be an academic, but it doesn't mean that I don't want other people to be. And I love supporting other people, and I love the university environment. And like you say, actually supporting researchers in a variety of disciplines, I love it. The variety it brings me and the things I learn from other people, I just enjoy it so much. I spend a lot of time working with people, for example, on fellowship applications, and I get to hear all the kinds of amazing things that they're doing. And I just love it personally. I don't think I was ever going to be someone who really stuck really clearly to one discipline. I didn't do it when I did my PhD. My PhD was a kind of mixture of archaeology and anthropology and psychology. And I loved bringing together different disciplines and thinking about the same thing from a bunch of different angles. And I've always enjoyed communicating with a range of audiences, both academic and the public. So for me, processing the change wasn't too hard actually, because actually I changed into a career I moved into a career that much better suited the way I communicate and the way I work and the way I think anyway.
That's a fantastic insight in understanding more how you process that change because you were already interdisciplinary in your
Yeah.
research and mindset, so that wasn't a barrier for you at all. That's very interesting. And you know what? When we first met, when you joined our team and you explained to me how interdisciplinary your PhD was, mixing archaeology with anthropology and the psychology around attachment to objects and how it helps human beings cope with adversity and change. And it made me reflect ahead of this podcast about all the changes that we have seen as a sector in general here at the University of Leeds, especially since the pandemic. And with that hat on, so to speak, could you tell me more about what belonging means to you and what more you think could be done to make sure that our colleagues at Leeds are supported to cope with change, the people we work with, and feel acknowledged and recognized at the university?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good question because I think this is one of the areas in which my research is actually really useful as a research developer, because I spent a lot of time thinking about, what makes I did a lot of stuff on what makes people attached to objects, and really what I found during my PhD is what often makes people attached to objects is a sense of anxiety or stress. But I did a lot of broader research into thinking about the ways that stress affects us on a day-to-day basis, and the ways that we can cultivate feelings of security, feelings of belonging to feel better. So belonging for me is not just having a place where you feel safe and you feel accepted, but also somewhere that allows you to take risks, be yourself, and push the boundaries a little bit. And I think one of the things that we can really do as a university, and I think anyone can do this really, whether you're working with people or particularly managing people, is don't be afraid to support others to take those risks. So I've been really lucky in the last couple of jobs I've had when I've started, senior members of staff have said to me really explicitly, don't be afraid to fail. Try things, and if they don't work, that's fine. We learn from it. It's a learning process. And so something I'm really interested in, and I'm just about to start up some work on this, is creating, and how do we create an environment in which it's not just that we feel like we belong, we feel safe, but we feel able to push the boundaries, to take risks, and to not be afraid to fail. Because what's one of the things I learned from my research, when we feel safe, when we feel secure, we're then able to push ourselves, to take those risks, to explore a little bit more. And as researchers and as a research community, that's what we're always being encouraged to do. And I often don't think we realize that we need to create that sense of belonging in order to make those risks want to happen, because it feels a bit counterintuitive. You need to feel safe to take a risk, but I think we have a role there in how we introduce people into the university environment, and how we talk about the notion of risk and failure, because I think failure is often something we see as a bad thing. If you fail, that's a bad thing, but actually what we need to do is we need to turn that around and think about failure as something that helps us learn, something that we move on from, that allows us to be better. And that's something I'm still coming to terms with myself, because I'm a terrible perfectionist. Um, and I have to remind myself every time, if it fails, I'll learn something from it. If it fails, we'll sit back and go, right, what could we do better? How could we improve? What didn't work? And then hopefully we'll move towards a better iteration of whatever it is that we're doing.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. And you're so right, because academia kind of like educates us that failure is bad, and that,
Yeah.
but at the same time we have to take a risk. We have to be innovative, and you're absolutely right. People innovate better. We innovate better
Yeah.
when we feel there's a safety net and people will catch us rather than admonish us for trying. So
Exactly.
creating an environment in our research culture where people feel safe to innovate and take that risk is really crucial.
Yeah, yep, no, I
But we
can
have
I
to lead by
completely agree.
example and feel comfortable taking risks ourselves before
Yes,
we then present it to others and want others to join us on the mindset of risk taking and innovation.
yes. Yeah, 100%. I kind of wish that there was more research funding for really risky research. I kind of wish there was. I mean, you get some funders like the Leverhulme, for example, who quite like risky research, but I don't think there are enough funders who are brave enough to say, we don't mind if this doesn't work, we just want you to give it a go. Because I think we are seeing changes in research culture. It is changing gradually, but I think a lot of us have kind of taken in, imbibed this notion that we can't fail because that means we're a failure. If you failed, you failed. You failed, you learn, you move on. And I think that's something. It's probably going to take us years as a kind of sector to really move away from that traditional narrative.
Absolutely. And this is where working across sector with sector who are more agile and maybe less
Hmm.
scared in their mindset and in the way they function, collaboration can help us move towards that more innovative and not risk adverse
Yes, yeah.
mindset in our own setting. Thank you so much, Taryn. I was wondering if from your career path so far, your life so far, you could think of maybe two memorable moments in your professional or personal life that really helped you be who you are today, come to where you are today.
Hmm. So I'm gonna pick two other moments, because I was originally going to talk about what I talked about earlier about the friend who was the life coach, who really gave me a good talking to and helped me understand that um, I had plenty to offer besides being an academic. But I think there are a couple of other things. Firstly, during my PhD, I won funding to go to the US to do research at the Smithsonian for, it was meant to be 3 months, but I went in early 2020. So naturally it got cut off. These things happen. But I did get 2.5 months there. And honestly, they were two and a half of the best months of my life. It was my first time away from the UK on my own for a prolonged period of time. And honestly, I was dreading it. I'm such a homebody and I was so scared, but I really pushed myself. And honestly, I think it was the making of me. I really do feel like I came back a different person. And also, you spend 2.5 months in Washington, D.C., it's a wonderful place to be and it's so much fun. And, I got to experience so much. And particularly given that we then went into lockdown for quite a long period of time afterwards, it was like a kind of final hurrah before we went off into lockdown and couldn't even leave our houses, let alone walk down the road. Um, I think I think the second one, and it's not necessarily a memorable moment as a kind of series of moments, is I'm I've traditionally been quite a workaholic. I have a tendency, I'm a perfectionist and I can be a bit of a workhorse, so I can work and work and work at something until it's perfect. My partner is not like that at all. And I hope you don't take this the wrong way, Marjorie. He has a very typically French approach to work, which his view is you are paid to work a certain number of hours, and when those hours are over, sorry, you shut your laptop and you go get on with your life. And honestly, that has been revolutionary for me because he has been um, such a good influence on me in encouraging me not to overwork if I don't want to, and to actually step away and to not tie my entire identity to my work so much. And honestly, I think that has taken years and years and years of work and years and years and years of him coming up behind me while I'm working in the office and going, are you sure you want to be working at this time? Could you maybe come back to this tomorrow morning? And that's been such a useful lesson in learning to strike a bit of a better balance in my professional life.
You know what? I'm not taking offense at the French way of working at all. Because first of all, I can totally relate with the expatriation bit or moving away from home being a defining moment in your life, and well done for doing that, knowing that you were a homebody, as you said. Um, it is an enriching experience, but it's very daunting. And picking up on what you said about your partner, who is a French like myself, when I arrived in the UK, my work-life balance went out of the window for a solid decade, and it's
Mm.
lockdown who brought me back into, for me, it's motherhood and lockdown, to be fair, who brought
Hmm.
me back. You need to cut off work at some point. Otherwise, like yourself, I had gotten into the habit of working all the time. So I really appreciate your honesty in the cultural difference and benefit that our French core work values brought to
Yeah.
you, helped you have achieve better work-life balance and mental health. It's very interesting to see how, when our culture influences one another, there are benefits and pros and cons to both. And yeah, academia can make you work really, really hard.
Yeah.
So some things that we are changing in our culture right now as well is that concept that you need to be at your computer, at your desk, at your bench all the time. And
Absolutely.
more emphasis on how we look after ourselves so that we keep our mind healthy so that we can create, innovate, and so produce the best research, support researchers to the best of our abilities.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard you be very honest, and thank you again for that, about your imposter syndrome, your perfectionism from the perspective of how it can drive you to working too much or having like a more constrained approach to your work-life balance. But I would really like to ask you if there are any particular aspects or qualities, positive traits about yourself that you felt particularly proud of. And I've worked with you, so I know there will be plenty, and that you can share with us and our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I am not necessarily always the quickest person or the most creative person. I wish I was. But I think the thing that I'm proud of is that I do work hard and I'm persistent and I push myself out of my comfort zone. This last part is something that's really changed over the last few years. I never really used to push myself out of my comfort zone. But increasingly, I've realized that some of the most valuable personal and professional experiences I've had have been when I've really pushed myself. And that's something I'm really proud of because, like I say, it doesn't come naturally to me. And so anytime I do something and I'm scared, I remind myself I'm scared now, but I won't regret it down the line. I've never, genuinely never pushed myself and regretted it. I went to the US. I decided to, after my PhD, I decided to change my career path, and all these things were big, challenging things, and I they've just added so much value to like I say, both to my personal and professional life.
Thank you. That's fantastic to hear because I know how daring things and daunting things can be, especially in our team and the changes and all the people we have to work with. And as you said, challenge yourself, think outside of the box, push the boundaries. This is how we progress. And as role models, this is what we do and try to inspire others to do. And you're definitely one of those great role models. And I am really grateful to have you as a colleague and a friend.
Oh, thank you.
Taryn, thank you so much for talking to me today as part of our Role Models on Your Doorstep podcast series. Having the privilege of working with you, it has been really a pleasure to learn more about your career journey today. This has been Marjorie Boissinot interviewing Dr. Taryn Bell. For those listening in, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for your interest, and please do drop in and listen to the other stories we have shared as part of our warm We Are Role Models project. Speak soon, and goodbye for now.